Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Killing Eve. Great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I like that opening situation with Dasha, because at first, the moment that scene was playing out, I was like, is this going to be revealed to be like, Villanelle's mom or something like that? But then in retrospect, like all her family is dead, so it's like, but later on we find out it's like, oh, Dasha's the one that trained her and everything. It's like, oh, that's interesting. So I think we're going to get a little more insight into how she became who she is, maybe, like, because that's something we've never really learned too much about, that history into how she got to where she is, kind of being basically the proficient killer that she is. So but then we like hard cut to her having, it's like, oh, someone's wedding and stuff. You're like, oh, is this her like assignment or something? It's like, oh no, she's there. And for her, she's saying like, and I love that at first she's like, things kind of ended badly with my previous relationship, but now I feel happy knowing, I never thought I'd be happy, but I'm happy knowing that she's dead. And her bride is laughing like, ha ha ha. No one else in the room is really laughing about it. I was like, that's effed up. Like from the outside perspective, it seems like a fucked up joke because it's like, oh, your ex isn't really dead, but it's like, no, you killed her. And everything, but obviously it's like this is kind of like her rebound because apparently this is kind of like fairly soon after everything went down with Eve and Roe, so it's kind of interesting to know like you immediately, I guess she wanted to probably like pretend like it didn't matter to her, but it did because Eve was special to her and she thinks like, oh, I killed the one person I was actually in love with. Maybe whether it was actually love or whether it was Villanelle's version of love, but whatever the case may be. But then she attacks the old lady that's there, and it's like, this is my special day. And I love that it turns into a brawl at the wedding, like between different people. And all we see is Dasha and Villanelle leaving in the car. So it's like, oh, did that wedding get called off? Did they null and void that immediately? We never cut back to like what happened with that. Like, so is that relationship just done? Or you're just kind of like, well, Dasha's here, whatever, I'm done. We're stay married. I don't care. I don't know. Like, it's Villanelle, so you never know how those circumstances will play out. But obviously, her and Dasha have a very interesting relationship because apparently Dasha trained other people. It's like, oh, you should see all the other people they brought for me to train because none of them can basically hold a candle to you. So it's like basically like it's like I can give you whatever you want because obviously the 12 want you back, So it's like you do enough stuff and kind of show them like, hey, you can do this. It's like working with me. I could give you whatever you want. It's like, but what do you want out of it? And apparently it's to get back in Russia. I don't know if it has anything to do with. I'm assuming it has to deal with her past because. Basically, her and Eve talk about it later on. Not Eve, Villanelle talk about it later on about like how like she's like, yeah, even to this day, like people study her like Dasha's kills and stuff like that. It's like no one can top them. Which Villanelle is like their antiquated kills are so old school. Like that's what that is. Because like Dasha's like, oh, it's they're untouchable. I won't lie, like that whole situation with that lady she was there to kill. And at first she's got the knife out, but then it's like, oh, you're on this rickety ladder. Villanelle's gonna be like, oh, I can just do it this way. And she shoves her she moves the ladder and she falls. And I'm like, well, really? I was like, the whole thing is, that was the whole ghost situation to make things look like an accident and stuff like that. I was like, aren't you going to put a little pizzazz or flair to it? I was like, oh, I guess not. I guess you don't have any reason to because, it's like Eve's not around to track you anymore. So I guess you don't feel the need to. But then the lady still seems alive. I'm like, oh, I didn't expect that. And then she proceeded to kill her. And then she framed the body. I was like, the moment she started pouring stuff on, I'm like, isn't that like Dasha's quote unquote first kill? Because we don't know if that's actually her first kill or not. But then she's like, untouchable. It's like, look, I did your work better than you, like type of situation. I was like, So I'm wondering, is that going to be a compare and contrast thing the entire season? What I thought was really interesting is the fact is, what Villanelle wanted, she wants to be a keeper, and I was like, that's interesting. Keepers being what Constantine referred to, the people who know all the names. Like, he didn't know who the 12 were because he wasn't one of the keepers. He wasn't one of the people that was in a high enough position to know the names, to be trusted enough to know the names of the people who know the names type of situation. That type of thing. Like, I know a guy who knows those people type of thing. So she wants to be those keepers. She wants to be a keeper, which I'm like, at first I'm like, does it have anything to do with her tracking down Constantine? Because like she wants to kill Constantine because she made a promise last season. Oh, I'm gonna track you down. I'm gonna kill you and your family. So it's like, I don't know if that has anything to do with that, or is it just her thing of thinking like, oh, she needs something to kind of fill that void in her life, that because of the whole Eve thing. So she wants everything, and it's like, it's a thing of like she thinks she wants everything, but nothing ever ends up being satisfactory enough. But I guess it's like being closer to the top. Maybe it just means she can kind of do whatever she wants. I mean, she can kind of get back to doing what she wanted to do, that, you know, doing her job and everything. So maybe being a keeper kind of helps with that. Whatever the case may be. I'm curious to see like what it is, what kind of fulfillment she's planning on getting from being a keeper. Like why that's suddenly so important, because it never seemed like it mattered before, but now it matters. Now, I guess just because of everything that went down in Rome, she kind of wants to be in the know about a lot of stuff, like who she worked, like who everyone really is, like where the chessboard pretty much lies. I think type of situation. Other than that, we learn about Eve's situation. The fact of the matter is just kind of almost like a boring everyday life, obviously in hiding and stuff like that. And I'm curious, I'm like, okay, so like how's this whole thing working out? I love that at one point she texts toilet paper. She's like thinking of you. At first I was like, is that towards Kenny, or is that supposed to be towards Nico? I was like, it wouldn't be Nico, would it? Would it be Kenny? Turns out it is Kenny. And the reason why I think the reason why I thought of Kenny was because just because this is super fresh in my mind, because I literally just binged season 1 and season 2. Is the fact is when she when she went to the bathroom the first time, like she worked with Carolyn and everyone, it's like. He handed her a roll of tissue. He's like, oh, how much do you think you're going to need? And she's like, I'm just going to take the whole roll and then bring it back when I'm done. And he was like, okay. And that's like one of her earliest interactions with Kenny. So that's kind of, I guess, become an inside joke between them or something like that. I just thought that was interesting. That's why I was like, oh. So it's like, okay, so it makes total sense when it ended up being Kenny. But because obviously, like, Kenny ends up talking to her because, like, Kenny apparently, like, because obviously he's like, hey, I'm sorry about the whole room. She's like, I honestly would rather not talk about it. He's like, because you would rather bury it. And she's like, yeah, I like him being like, that's very British of you, which I like. I think that's such a funny stereotype, because I've seen that come up in like British stuff from time to time, or at least like like I said, it's a stereotype about British people, that British people bury shit. It's like you can make the thing of like Americans like wear their heart on their sleeves, but the stereotype is like British people. It's like, no, you bury it and just kind of, you don't make a fuss type of situation, you know. But they're kind of like laughing and joking, and it's like, oh, Kenny doesn't work with MI6 anymore because of the whole Rome situation, because he actually went to see Eve, but they wouldn't let her see him. They wouldn't let Kenny see Eve during that whole situation. And the fact of the matter, it's very lucky things kind of worked out for both Eve and Constantine, because it seems like Villanelle took a shot at your heart and ended up missing, or I would assume just because it seems like where the scar is from, like, I guess the bullet being removed and whatnot. But the fact of the matter is, he ended up quitting, and now he works at kind of like he's kind of a journalist right now. Because what was interesting is we saw him at work at one point in time, and he like was looking at Frank and Fat Panda, and it was like he was just kind of staring at it, and I was like, oh, can't quite let it go. But then we see him delete it. It's like, oh, I guess he can. But what was interesting though is like when he's talking to her about the whole thing, he was basically like, oh, so have you been in contact? And she's like, no, I'm done with her. I'm done with it. And it's like, oh, I'm not talking about Villanelle, I'm talking about Nico. She's like, oh, of course. But the sad thing is that your mind immediately went to Villanelle, means that she's still there in your head. But it turns out it's like, yeah, I've seen Nico. It's like, but I see him every couple of days, and and then Kitty was like, okay, yeah, I know. I was curious if we were going to get to that, but we do. I'll get to that in a second. But I thought it was interesting. Kenny was basically like, no one's looking for the 12 anymore because MI6 shut down the investigation. I guess just because of all the shenanigans that went down under Carolyn's watch, but also, I guess just like maybe just the type of thing of just like it's not. And maybe there's other reasons for it, but nevertheless, Kenny seems like he's still looking into it. But he brings it up to Eve, but Eve is like she wants nothing to do with it. It almost got her killed and everything. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Circling back to the Nico thing was really interesting, and we find out that basically Gemma's death was ruled as suicide. It's like, yeah, her family thinks she killed herself, because it seems like Nico's in like a medical facility, because I guess he needs to kind of be kept an eye on, and I guess they're selling their house and stuff like that because they can't go back there anymore, just in case. But she's like, oh, we're going to get through this, which for Nico, it's like he's basically had enough for a long time, and now it's just like this was kind of like the last straw is the fact of the matter is for him, it's like, we both know I deserve better than this. I definitely deserve better than this. I definitely deserve better than you. It's just because it's like, you want to make it seem like, oh, you didn't want this job and everything, but you didn't fight hard to kind of get away from it. You kind of lived in it, and now it's like, we're kind of suffering the ramifications from it. And obviously she's kind of upset, just because it's like, she is kind of the reason why everything turned to shit the way it did in many different regards, not just professionally, not just in the personal life of her marriage, also just everything turned out the way it did with Villanelle, just because she felt a certain way, not just how Villanelle felt, it was also about how Eve felt, and it's just like she thought she had control of the situation, when in actuality she herself was a little out of control without her really realizing it. I'll go ahead and talk about it. I love that we end up finding out some answers. It's like, oh, what about Hugo? Oh, Hugo's suing MI6 for his injuries he sustained last season. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Because basically it turns out Carolyn isn't kind of running things right now. Paul is. And the moment I was like, she's like, and she introduces home dude Moj to Paul. I was like, the same Paul that was going through some shit last season that her and what's her face were talking about. It's like, because I thought it was about his boyfriend. It says, because he's like, oh, I'm going through a divorce. I'm like, oh, I thought it was your boyfriend that was cheating on you, or that you broke up. Because like, she was like, oh yeah, tell him I'm sorry about his boy. Because like, that's what she had said last season. So I was like, I thought that was that. Was that last season or was that season 1? I'm pretty sure that was season 2. Like, a lot of that's kind of blurring together in my head. But yeah, it was definitely season 2, I believe. Yeah. So that's why I was wondering, like, if that was the same Paul. But basically, he's kind of taking over or he's supposed to be overseeing. And I love that he's like, oh yeah, sorry about the whole office business. They just told me to take your. It's just like, and she tries to pretend like it's okay. She's like, well, Paul, I don't even know where my office is, but she's just kind of like, and just the look on her face wants to just throw him the biggest middle fingers, because she's not too happy about this situation. And obviously she has to explain all the shenanigans that's going down, all the failed stuff right now. And the sad thing is her and Kenny's relationship being, ultimately what it is, I thought was kind of fascinating, where it's like, basically he's trying to make his own choices and stuff like that. Because I love, like, he's got that little sports finger, and she's like, you're packing it? And it's like, yeah. And she's like, because when you look at this, you think of happy memories. He's like, yeah, which kind of shows you how detached Carolyn is. I'm like, why would something stupid like this give you happy memories? Okay, but you're going to sort this out right now. He's like, I got to work on, and she's like, that online websites make you work on weekends. He's like, you made me work on weekends. She's like, yeah, but there were murders over the weekend. Like, it's like something important, not this blah 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 blah, whatever it is that you do. But Kenny trying to stay a little steadfast in himself of being like, aren't you going to apologize for everything that went down? And for Carolyn, it's like, the fact is, basically a lot of life is trade-offs. Almost kind of like you have to make compromises in life of like, for something to happen, you kind of have to make trade-offs. And she makes an example of like the house your dad wanted to move in. I didn't really like it, but he liked it. So I, basically compromised and went along with it. So that's kind of what her job calls for. So it's just kind of no apologizing is going to be enough for it. So that's kind of where they stand. But at the same time, it's like, she's like, so do you want this to eat? And he's like, this. And she's like, okay. And he's like, it's not a website. It's blah, blah, blah. She's like, yeah, sure. That sounds great. And it's like, oh. And at the same time, you're like, that's the last interaction they had, sadly enough. Because obviously Eve, called Kenny up and wanted to meet with him because he had actually suggested them kind of hanging out. And because it's kind of a shame, because like, it's kind of good to see that they're on good terms again, because like Kenny's like, in all honesty, the only friend Eve kind of had over the course of the series, and currently is the only friend she has. But then like Kenny was in there looking into stuff. I was like, okay. And then like we hear some noises. I'm like, oh, please don't tell me. I was like, please don't tell me. Please don't tell me. Eve gets there. We see somebody fall. I was like, they killed Kenny and made it look like a suicide. I was like, no. I was like, once again, her one friend, especially because it's like the 12 must have found out he was looking into it. Because he doesn't have MI6's protection anymore. So it's like they were able to kind of get to him. But it's also like, which implies maybe they're the ones that set the whole thing up of stop looking into this whole 12 situation. Oh, there's still investigations into the 12 thing. So Eve's there with them. Now, what's going to be really interesting, it's kind of fucked up to say, is how Carolyn is going to react to this, because there was that conversation between her and Constantine last season where he was like, what if you could never see your son again? She's like, as long as I know he was safe, I'd be fine never seeing him for the rest of it, because obviously it was his whole situation was like, I need to know where my family is. So now that begs the question, like, how's she gonna, because like basically her whole thing was like she kept Kenny at a distance, like emotionally she wasn't like made him like, it's like, oh, like the motherly instinct, she kind of buried it a little bit so that if she ever got separated, like that way she can do her job proficiently and never have to like, you know, like her and Kenny had their very particular relationship. I'm curious to see what is she going to be very like, yes, it's a shame, you know, very stone-faced about it, because she obviously is very kind of almost robotic in how she kind of keeps her feelings, because she's almost like normal, like human interaction stuff seems like what? I don't get it, you know? So like that type of stuff doesn't kind of compute well with her, so I'm curious to see how, I think this might break her. I mean, this is her only son and everything, but I'm curious in the long run to see what happens, but it's such a shame that it happened. I was like, no, killing him off in the first episode too? Holy shit. It catches me off guard when shows do that. I'm like, oh, this is one of the main characters. Oh, new season? Hey, just kill him in the first 2 episodes. I've seen some shit like that happen. I was like, I wouldn't have expected that, but it happens from time to time, and I think that's such a fascinating choice. I'm like, okay, you making that choice. Okay. Let's get into this, whatever it is that Constantine's up to, because he's getting letters in like Russian. What was it? One of them was like time to go fishing, which I'm like, I don't think that's from Villanelle. That's from whatever it is that Constantine's mixed up in, because he was getting a call about like some people being like, oh, there's some shit going down that he's involved in, like whatever that is. I'm like, okay, so what's that storyline? I'm assuming that's connected to the 12, maybe. I don't know. I also love that he's kind of ignoring his daughter's call, because she's like, yeah, my mom's boyfriend and stuff like that. He also got her something, and the lady's like, oh, did she like that? And it's like, oh no, she hates everything, and that's why I'm sending it to her. I'm like, he has such a weird relationship with his daughter. I mean, to be fair, he thinks his daughter's annoying, so he'll do anything just to kind of piss her off and annoy her. But nevertheless, that's a lot to chew on. All right, we're kind of catching up on, like, I don't think they've explained, like, what the time frame is between Season 2's finale and this. I don't think they really went into that. But obviously, Eve wanted nothing to do with this case, but this might be enough to drag her back in, especially because it's like, she'll probably start it off being like, oh, this is revenge for Kenny. Maybe it'll start there. Maybe it'll grow into something else, especially, like, if Villanelle's involved. But, like, it seems like she's kind of doing her own thing now. But it's probably a thing of, it's all connected. Because where we are in the story, we've yet to really scratch this 12 thing. It's been there, and it feel like we've only gotten little scratches at it over the course of the series. Over 2 seasons, it feel like we know nothing about this group, who's truly involved. Like, other than, like, they want chaos, other than that, we don't really know. So, well, obviously we know Villanelle's story is going to be tied into that, because she's asking to be a keeper and everything. So eventually is going to they're going to cross paths. But the whole point is for Eve to make it seem like, oh, I'm dead. I'm curious to see what Villanelle's reaction is going to be like when she finds out Eve's still alive. It's like, Eve thought she killed Villanelle at the end of season 1. She's like, I don't know if she's alive or dead. I think she felt a little relief knowing that she was alive. I mean, the same thing for Villanelle when she found out, oh, Constantine, you're not dead, you're alive. So it's almost, what would be the word? There's almost I don't know, symmetry to it. Symmetry is not the word. Reciprocal. I don't know. I don't know what the word is I'm looking to really describe it. It's really interesting to see how that all kind of circles back together. Is kind of what I'm trying to say. But I'm very interested to see ultimately where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.